The water hit me like a sledgehammer, a brutal, freezing wall that knocked the breath right out of my lungs before I even had time to scream. But the cold wasn't the worst part. The worst part was the last thing I saw before the Atlantic Ocean swallowed me whole. My son, David, standing on the deck of his gleaming white yacht, just watching. He didn't reach out. He didn't scream. He just stood there, his hand resting casually on the railing, while his wife's whisper still echoed in my ears like a curse. "Say hi to the sharks." I fought to kick my legs, but the heavy navy blue dress, the one my late husband Robert had always said, matched my eyes. The one I had worn specifically to honor his memory on what was supposed to be a family celebration, was dragging me down like a lead weight. I could see the distorted shape of the yacht's hull moving away, the white fiberglass gleaming against the midday sun, getting smaller and smaller. They weren't turning around. They weren't throwing a life preserver. They were accelerating. My own son, the boy I had nursed through chickenpox, the man whose college tuition I had paid in full, the person I loved more than life itself, was leaving me to die in the middle of the ocean. My lungs burned. My hip, replaced only 6 weeks ago, screamed in protest as I kicked harder, fighting the weight of the water and the crushing realization that my murder had been planned. This wasn't an accident. This was an execution. And as I broke the surface, gasping for air that tasted of salt and betrayal, I realized something else. I wasn't just fighting for my life. I was fighting for the truth. Because if I let the ocean take me today, David and Vanessa One wouldn't just get my $3 billion. They would get away with erasing me completely. And that, my darlings, was simply not going to happen. If you've ever had your heart broken by the very people you gave life to, then you know that specific kind of cold. It's colder than the North Atlantic. If you're listening to this, and you know that feeling, do me a favor and subscribe, and let me know in the comments where you're watching from. Because we need to stick together. Let me take you back to how a perfectly reasonable Tuesday morning turned into a fight for survival. I suppose, looking back with the clarity of hindsight, I should have seen the cracks in the porcelain long before it shattered. But at 67, I still clung to the old-fashioned idea that family meant sanctuary. That blood was thicker than seawater, if you will. The morning had started with such promise. David had called me personally, not through his assistant, which should have been my first red flag. He invited me for a celebration cruise on his new yacht. "Mom, we want to toast your recovery from the surgery," he'd said, his voice warm with what I mistook for genuine affection. Just the three of us, like a real family. I had been desperate for that. Since Robert passed 2 years ago, leaving me with the emptiness of our large house and the weight of his tech empire fortune, things had felt different. Colder. David and Vanessa came around less often, and when they did, their eyes were always scanning the room, assessing, calculating. But I pushed those thoughts away. I dressed carefully that morning, putting on my pearls and that navy dress, hoping to bridge the gap that had grown between us. The yacht was magnificent. A 42-foot vessel of pure white luxury that bobbed gently at the marina. David greeted me with a hug that felt stiff, performative, while Vanessa watched from the deck, her smile sharp enough to cut glass. "Isn't she beautiful?" David had asked, gesturing to the boat. He didn't mention that they had bought it with the $3 million I'd given them last year to invest in his consulting firm. Money I was beginning to suspect had never seen the inside of a business account. The first hour was pleasant enough, lulling me into a false sense of security. We sailed into calm waters, the Massachusetts coastline fading into a gray line behind us. Vanessa served mimosas and talked about their plans to renovate my old house, the one I had signed over to them after Robert died, because I thought downsizing to the condo would be simpler. I tried to ignore the fact that they were gutting the library Robert had loved so much. But then the tone shifted. It wasn't sudden. It was a slow slide into interrogation. David started asking questions, casual at first, then probing. He asked about my will, about the trust arrangements, about whether I'd considered making changes to simplify things. "It's just that probate can be so complicated, Mom," he said, refilling my champagne glass with a little too much enthusiasm. "We want to make sure everything's taken care of." That's when I noticed Vanessa. She was holding her phone at an odd angle, pretending to take selfies, but the lens was pointed directly at me. She was filming me while I drank, filming me while I stumbled slightly over a word, building a dossier of evidence. The pieces clicked together with horrible clarity. The surgery I'd just had. The way they insisted on handling my paperwork afterward. The power of attorney documents they'd brought to the hospital, claiming it was just temporary to help with bills. The way my financial advisor had suddenly stopped returning my calls. "David," I had said, setting down my glass, my hand trembling not from age, but from sudden, terrifying insight. "I'd like to go back to shore now." That was the moment the mask slipped. "I'm afraid that's not going to happen, Mom." His voice was different now, harder, unrecognizable. "See, we need to have a conversation about your health, about your memory issues." "Memory issues?" I snapped, my spine straightening. "I was a math teacher for 30 years. I manage a complex portfolio. I am sharper than both of you, combined." "You've been showing signs of dementia," Vanessa added, stepping closer, blocking the path to the cabin. "We have it documented. The doctors agree that you're no longer capable of managing your financial affairs." "That's absurd." But even as I said it, I looked around. The boat was miles from shore. No other vessels in sight. Just the vast, indifferent ocean and the two people who were supposed to protect me. "Mom, we're trying to help you," David said, but his eyes were as cold as winter. "We can do this the easy way or the hard way." I stood up slowly, my hip aching, but my mind crystal clear. "And if I refuse?" Vanessa smiled then, really smiled. "Well, elderly woman, recent surgery probably took too many pain medications, got disoriented on the boat." She shrugged. "Tragic accidents happen all the time." I looked at the documents David had pulled from a folder, papers transferring all assets to them immediately. Then I looked at the water. "Go to hell," I said. That was when Vanessa moved. It wasn't a violent struggle. It was a calculated shove when I was off balance. And as I fell, as the water rushed up to meet me, I heard those 5 words. Say hi to the sharks. Now, bobbing in the freezing chop, watching my son's boat disappear, I had a choice. I could panic or I could survive. Robert and I used to swim laps every morning. I was strong. I kicked off my shoes, letting them sink into the abyss. I lay on my back, conserving energy, letting the salt water buoy me up. I don't know how long I drifted. 10 minutes? An hour? Time loses its meaning when you are freezing to death. I started to hallucinate. I saw Robert's face in the clouds. I heard my mother calling me for dinner. But then, a sound cut through the delirium. An engine. A throaty, chugging diesel engine. Completely different from the smooth hum of David's yacht. Holy hell! Over there! Tyler, cut the engine! The voice was rough, gravelly, and the most beautiful thing I had ever heard. Strong hands grabbed my arms, hauling me over a gunnel that smelled of fish and old oil. I collapsed onto the deck of a fishing boat, shivering so violently my teeth felt like they were going to shatter. Lady, what happened to you? An older man, weathered like driftwood, wrapped a heavy wool blanket around me. A teenager, his grandson presumably, stared at me with wide eyes. My family, I managed to stutter. The yacht? We saw them take off like a bat out of hell, the man said grimly. Didn't look back once. What kind of people leave someone floating in the middle of the ocean? The kind who inherit $3 billion if I'm not around to stop them, I thought. But out loud, I just said, the kind who aren't really family. The captain introduced himself as Jake Morrison, and his grandson was Tyler. They were good people. You can tell a lot about a person by how they treat a stranger in distress. Jake radioed the Coast Guard immediately. Wait, I said, grabbing his wrist. My hand was blue with cold, but my grip was iron. Please, don't let them know you found me. Not yet. Jake studied my face. He had eyes that had seen storms and calm seas alike. He knew trouble when he saw it. You in some kind of danger, ma'am? Yes, but not the kind you're thinking. I need to get to shore without anyone knowing I survived. Can you help me? Jake looked at Tyler, then back at me. He keyed the radio. Coast Guard, this is Molly Sue. False alarm on that rescue? Turned out to be debris, all clear. He saved my life twice in that moment. Once from the water, and once from the trap my son had set. As we chugged toward a small, private dock in Gloucester, away from the main marina where David would be docking, I told Jake everything. I told him about the money, the documents, the fake dementia claims. I told him about the betrayal that hurt worse than the hypothermia. So, they figured they'd rather be rich orphans than broke kids with a living mother, Jake said, spitting over the side of the boat. Disgusting. What are you going to do? Tyler asked. I'm going to let them think they won, I said, and I was surprised by how steady my voice sounded. The shivering had stopped. A cold rage was replacing the chill of the ocean. And then I'm going to destroy them. Jake grinned, revealing a gold tooth. Now that sounds like a plan worth helping with. Jake took me to a woman named Mrs. Chen, who ran a cash-only bed and breakfast. She was a tough woman in her 70s, who asked no questions, just took one look at my bedraggled state and started heating chicken broth. I've seen people running from all kinds of things, she said. Long as you're not bringing violence to my door, you're welcome. That evening, wearing borrowed clothes that smelled of lavender, I sat at Mrs. Chen's kitchen table and watched my own life end on the local news. The report was sickeningly perfect. Tragic boating accident claims life of philanthropist, the headline read. The screen showed a photo of me, one David had chosen carefully. It was from a birthday party last year where I looked confused. I remembered that moment. I had been confused because they had surprised me, and the flash had blinded me. But on the news, I just looked like a senile old woman. Then there was David. He was crying. Actually crying. He stood on the dock, Vanessa clutching his arm, looking devastated. Mom had been struggling with her memory lately, he told the reporters, his voice breaking. She must have gotten disoriented. We turned around for just a second. Bastards, I whispered. Mrs. Chen looked up from her knitting. Planning something special for them? Oh, yes. Something very special. I was officially dead. And the thing about being dead is that it gives you a lot of freedom. For the next 4 days, I became a ghost in my own life. Jake became my eyes and ears. He hung around the marina listening to gossip. He reported that David and Vanessa were playing the grieving family perfectly, but they were also moving fast. Too fast. They're not wasting any time, Jake told me on the 3rd day. They've already scheduled the funeral for Friday. Closed casket, obviously. Of course, I said. Hard to have an open casket when the body is shark food. And there's something else, Jake hesitated. I saw them at the marina today. They weren't alone. They had a baby with them. I froze. A baby? David and Vanessa don't have children. They always said they were too focused on their careers. Well, they have one now. Tiny thing, maybe a few weeks old. And here's the kicker. They were showing him off to people, talking about how tragic it is that you never got to meet your grandson. My blood ran cold. A baby? Where did they get a baby in the last 4 days? And why had they never mentioned a pregnancy? I need to see my house, I said. My old house, the one they're renovating. That's dangerous, Margaret. I have a key, and everyone thinks I'm dead. Who looks for a dead woman in her own home? That night, Jake dropped me off a block away from the Beacon Hill house where I had lived with Robert for 35 years. It was strange, creeping through the garden I had planted, hiding behind the rose bushes. The house was dark, but not empty. I could feel it. I let myself in through the back door. The kitchen was stocked with expensive food, not the kind you buy for a renovation site. They were living here, or someone was. I moved silently to Robert's study, the nerve center of the house. What I found on that desk made the attempted murder look like a playground prank. Papers were everywhere. Not just estate documents, but a timeline. A detailed printed timeline titled The Margaret Project. I shined my flashlight on it, my hand shaking with rage. Phase 1. Establish cognitive decline. Doctor visits, public confusion. Phase 2. Isolate from financial advisors. Phase 3. The accident. Phase 4. Probate and transfer. They had been planning this for over a year. Every time I had lost my keys, every time I had felt groggy after a meal at their house, it was all orchestrated. They had been drugging me, gaslighting me. but under the timeline was a birth certificate. Baby Harrison. Mother, Vanessa Harrison. Father, David Harrison. Date of birth, 3 weeks ago. I stared at it. I had seen Vanessa in a bikini on the yacht 4 days ago. She had not given birth 3 weeks ago. There wasn't a stretch mark on her. Then I heard it. A cry, a thin wailing sound coming from upstairs. I crept up the stairs, my heart pounding against my ribs. In the guest room, my old sewing room, there was a crib, and inside, a baby boy, tiny and red-faced, screaming his lungs out. A woman was sleeping in the chair next to the crib. A nanny, presumably. I didn't wake her. I just looked at the baby. He had dark hair and serious eyes. He was beautiful, and he was a pawn in their game. I took photos of everything with a disposable camera Jake had bought me. The documents, the timeline, the baby. As I was leaving the study, I found one more document that stopped my heart. A receipt from a place called Whitmore Reproductive Services. A payment of $50,000 for surrogacy facilitation, rush order. And a note attached. Biological mother. Sarah Collins, deceased. Deceased. They hadn't just bought a baby. They had bought a baby from a dead woman. I got out of the house just as headlights swept the driveway. David and Vanessa were coming home. I hid in the rhododendrons as they walked past, laughing. Laughing. Just days after killing his mother, my son was laughing about a dinner reservation. When I got back to Mrs. Chen's, I broke down, not from grief, but from the sheer magnitude of the evil I was dealing with. This wasn't just greed. This was a criminal enterprise. We need help, I told Jake the next morning. Professional help. Mrs. Chen poured me coffee. I know a guy. Private investigator. Used to be FBI, but he got tired of the bureaucracy. Danny Crawford. He owes me a favor. Danny Crawford was a godsend. He was a sharp-eyed man in his 50s who listened to my story without blinking. When I showed him the photos of the documents, his face went hard. Whitmore Reproductive Services, he muttered. I've heard rumors about them. Black market adoptions dressed up as high-end surrogacy. And this Sarah Collins, if she died during childbirth, and there's no record of an investigation, that means they have a coroner on the payroll. Can you prove it? I asked. Give me 48 hours. While Danny worked, I attended my own funeral. It was surreal, standing behind a maintenance shed at the cemetery, watching through binoculars. There were flowers everywhere, a mahogany casket that cost more than a car, and David, looking somber and dignified, accepting condolences. But I watched the crowd. My friends were there, genuinely crying. My book club ladies. My neighbor, Eleanor. But my lawyer wasn't there. My accountant wasn't there. Look who he's talking to, Jake whispered next to me. David was speaking to a woman I didn't recognize. She was petite, professional, with short auburn hair. She wasn't crying. She was handing him an envelope. That, Danny said later when we met up, is Miranda Torres. She's an estate lawyer, but she's not just any lawyer. She specializes in distress transitions. In the last 5 years, 12 of her elderly clients have died in tragic accidents shortly after signing over their assets. She's a serial killer, Mrs. Chen said, blunt as a hammer. She's a facilitator, Danny corrected. She sets it up. The families do the dirty work, and she takes a 20% cut. I felt sick. And the baby? The baby is the insurance policy, Danny explained. If you had died without a will, or if your will was contested, the grandchild creates a direct line of inheritance that bypasses other claims. Plus, it makes them look like a sympathetic young family. Sarah Collins? I asked, dreading the answer. Runaway. 17. No family. They found her, offered her money, and when the baby came, complications. Danny looked away. The nurse on duty suddenly bought a new house in Florida last week. I stood up. The rage was gone, replaced by a cold, hard resolve. They killed a 17-year-old girl. They tried to kill me. And they're using an orphan as a prop. What do you want to do? Danny asked. We have enough for the police, maybe. But these people are slippery. Torres has judges in her pocket. I don't want the police yet, I said. I want to scare them. I want them to know that the grave couldn't hold me. I want them to panic. Psychological warfare. Mrs. Chen nodded approvingly. I like it. The plan was simple. We would haunt them. It started with small things. I sent a bouquet of lilies to the house, my favorite flower, the ones Robert always bought me. The card simply read, Thinking of you. Love. Mom. Danny watched from his surveillance van. He said Vanessa screamed when she opened it. They frantically called the florist, but the order had been placed with cash by a kind old lady. Next, I visited the bank. Not to withdraw money, my accounts were frozen, but to access my safety deposit box. I had a second key, and the junior clerk didn't know I was dead yet. I left a single item in the box for the executor to find, a wet navy blue dress. I had bought a replica at a thrift store and soaked it in seawater. But the real blow came on the day of the probate hearing. They were in Miranda Torres's office, ready to sign the final papers to release the assets. They thought they had won. I had written a note. I had it delivered by a courier right into the middle of their meeting. Dear David and Vanessa, the water was colder than I expected, but the sharks weren't hungry. Give my regards to Sarah's baby. He deserves better parents. Love, Mom. Danny said they ran out of that building like it was on fire. They're cracking, Danny told me that night. Torres is panicking. She thinks there's a leak in her organization. She's calling in a cleaner to sweep the house for bugs. Then we need to move, I said. We need to get that baby out of there before they decide he's a liability. They're not going to hurt the baby, Jake said. He's their ticket to the money. Unless they think the game is up, I countered. If they think I'm alive and that I know about Sarah, the baby is evidence. Evidence of human trafficking and manslaughter. We formulated a plan, a dangerous one. I was going to come back from the dead. Publicly. The next morning, I walked up to the front door of my old house. I didn't sneak. I didn't hide. I marched up the steps and rang the bell. The nanny, the woman I had seen sleeping in the chair, answered. Her name was Carol. Danny had vetted her. She was innocent, just a hired hand who needed a paycheck. Can I help you? She asked, looking at my familiar face with confusion. Hello, Carol. I'm Margaret Harrison. I believe you're watching my grandson. She turned white. But You're dead? Yes, I've heard. Grossly exaggerated. I pushed past her gently. Is he in the nursery? Yes, but Mr. and Mrs. Harrison are on their way home. They called. They sounded furious. Good. We'll wait for them. I went upstairs and picked up the baby. He was so light. Hello, Robert, I whispered. We're going to call you Robert. Robert Sarah Harrison. When the front door slammed downstairs, Carol looked terrified. Please, she whispered. They're dangerous. I know, I said. Carol, take your phone. Go into the closet. Record everything you hear. Do not come out until I say so. She ran. I sat in the rocking chair, the baby in my arms, and waited. David and Vanessa burst into the room. They looked haggard, sleepless. Vanessa's hair was a mess. David's eyes were wild. When they saw me, the silence was absolute. Hello, darlings, I said, rocking gently. You look like you've seen a ghost. How? Vanessa whispered. We saw you sink. I'm a strong swimmer, I said. And you really should check for fishing boats before you commit murder. David stepped forward, his hands clenching into fists. You can't be here. You're dead. The certificate is signed. Undo it, I said calmly. You don't understand, David shouted, losing control. It's too late. Torres has the money. If we don't go through with this, she'll kill us. She has leverage on us for the baby. Ah, yes. The baby you bought from a dead girl. Vanessa gasped. You know, I know everything. I know about Sarah Collins. I know about the timeline on the desk. I know about the other 12 elderly people Torres has helped eliminate. We didn't kill Sarah, Vanessa shrieked. That was Torres. She said the girl died of natural causes. We just wanted a baby. And you wanted $3 billion so badly you were willing to kill your own mother to pay for it? David was shaking. Mom, please. We can fix this. We can just say you were found. Amnesia, anything. Just don't go to the police. Torres, she's connected. If she knows you're alive, she'll send someone to finish the job. For all of us. She's already on her way, I said. David froze. What? I called her. I lied. I told her I was alive and that I wanted to negotiate a new deal. She'll be here in 10 minutes. You're insane, Vanessa hissed. She won't negotiate. She'll burn this house down with us inside. Then you have a choice, I said, standing up, still holding little Robert. You can stand with her and go down for murder. Or you can stand with me. Confess to everything, and maybe, just maybe, I won't let you rot in prison for the rest of your lives. Why would you help us? David asked, tears finally spilling over. After what we did. I looked at him, really looked at him. I saw the greed, the weakness, the moral rot. But I also saw the little boy who used to bring me dandelions. Because I'm your mother, I said, my voice cracking for the first time. And God help me. I don't know how to stop being your mother. But make no mistake, David. You are going to prison. I am offering you a chance at redemption, not freedom. Before he could answer, the doorbell rang. Miranda Torres didn't wait to be invited. She had a key. Of course she did. She walked into the nursery, flanked by 2 large men in suits. She stopped when she saw me. She didn't look surprised. She looked annoyed. Mrs. Harrison, she said smoothly. You are remarkably resilient. It's the swimming, I said. David, Vanessa, she nodded to them. I see you've reunited. How touching. Unfortunately, this creates a complication. The deal is off, Miranda, David said, stepping between her and me. His voice shook, but he stood his ground. We're done. Miranda laughed. It was a dry, soulless sound. Oh, David, you don't get to be done. You bought a human being. You conspired to commit matricide. You are in this until the end. She gestured to the men. Clean this up. Make it look like a gas leak, all 4 of them. 4? Vanessa asked. The nanny is in the closet, Miranda said, bored. We heard her phone buzz. One of the men moved toward the closet. Now! I screamed. The nursery window shattered inward. Not from a gas explosion, but from a tactical entry team. Danny Crawford hadn't just brought a microphone. He had brought the cavalry. FBI, drop your weapons. The room erupted in chaos. Men in body armor poured in through the door and window. Miranda's goons were on the floor in seconds. Miranda herself tried to run, but Danny blocked the doorway, a grim smile on his face. Miranda Torres, he said, holding up a badge. You're under arrest for racketeering, human trafficking, and conspiracy to commit murder. As they handcuffed her, she looked at me with pure venom. You old witch! You should have just drowned. I know, I said, shielding the baby's eyes. But I had to say hi to the sharks for you. The aftermath was a whirlwind. David and Vanessa were arrested. They wept as they were led away. I didn't hug them. I stood on the porch, holding Robert Serra, and watched them go. They would testify against Torres in exchange for reduced sentences, but they would still spend a decade behind bars. It was hard. I won't lie to you and say it was a victory lap. Watching your child go to prison is a grief unlike any other. It's a mourning for the person they could have been. But life goes on. It took a year of legal battles, but with the help of Danny and a very good lawyer, I legally adopted Robert Serra. We found Sarah Collins's distant relatives in Maine. They were good people, but poor, and they couldn't take on a baby. They were just grateful to know he was safe and loved. We visit them every summer. Robert needs to know where he came from. I'm 72 now. Robert is 5. He's the light of my life. He has his mother's smile and my stubbornness. Mrs. Chen comes over for tea every Tuesday. Jake takes us out on his boat, a safe, sturdy fishing trawler, to watch the whales. We don't go near the yachts. David writes to me from prison. I read the letters, but I don't reply. Not yet. I'm still working on forgiveness. It's a slow process, like healing a broken hip. Some days it hurts more than others, but I learned something on that boat, and in the cold water, and in the fight that followed. I learned that family isn't just about whose blood runs in your veins. It's about who jumps in to save you when you're drowning. It's about who stands by you when the world calls you crazy. And most of all, I learned that it is never, ever too late to fight for your life. So, if you're sitting there, feeling like you're drowning, whether it's in debt or a bad marriage or loneliness or betrayal, I want you to listen to me. Kick. Kick hard. Break the surface. There are boats out there. There are people like Jake and Mrs. Chen and Danny. You just have to stay alive long enough to find them. I'm Margaret Harrison. I'm alive. And I'm not going anywhere. If this story touched something in you, if you've ever had to make the hard choice between family obligation and your own peace, please let me know in the comments. I read every single one. And remember, darlings, sometimes you have to let the old life sink so you can finally learn to swim. Subscribe for more stories, and stay safe out there. You never know who's watching.